I'm Andrea McVaney. I'm married to my hottie hubby, Jamie. We've been coming to LifeChurch for about 2.5 years, and we have 2 small children who live with us, a 3-year-old and 1-year-old, both boys.
So we were second weekend of being here. We attended LifeChurch for the first time, and we've been going here ever since. We've been plugged into a small group and right off the bat, and just built and continue to build relationships.
Our family here in Reno is LifeChurch. The people who we spend holidays with, the people who we call in times of crisis, it's LifeChurch. And so that community family atmosphere here is one of my favorite things. We made our Elevate commitment because LifeChurch it's our life. It's definitely part of our life. It is our family. It is our source for growth spiritually, just coming on Sundays and then life group. And so to know that we could be part of a campaign, we could be part of an initiative that would challenge us to give more sacrificially, and knowing that it's for God's kingdom, we were all in and we jumped on board. And it's just been amazing seeing God meet our financial needs and exceed them. He's grown our family just closer, grown my husband and I closer together. And again, it's just amazing to see that only things that God can do, only things that God can be explained by Him, we've seen through this Elevate challenge.
There's been times where we honored our commitment to Elevate and put a few things aside. The thing is that temporary comfort or discomfort it's just very temporary. The work that we see God doing, not just through LifeChurch, but everybody in the lives of everybody at LifeChurch and really here in Reno, is just, over the past couple of years that we've been here, it's just really seen a difference.
What excites me about this Elevate initiative is that God calls us to grow. He is a God who is always on the move, and this challenge has been challenging for me and for our family, and to see the Reno community growing and seeing that our church is stepping up right along with it, that's incredibly exciting, and I'm just filled with anticipation about what God's doing in our community and through LifeChurch.
One thing I'm excited to see about the future of LifeChurch is where we're going. It's that unknown, that planning, what we've seen over the past year. There's the impact that LifeChurch is making, not just in Reno, but all over the world. It's just incredible. And it all starts from everybody here. And it's truly the church is made up of the body. And when the body is participating, it's incredible what God does.
Give it up for the McVaneys. Yep. Hey, so today we're continuing a series kicked off last week called The Pursuit. We're looking at the life of David, and this is a part of kind of this midway point of our Elevate journey. If you weren't here last week, I encourage you to go to lifechurchreno.com, catch up with us. If you're new to LifeChurch, just a quick catch you up a little bit. Elevate is this 2-year spiritual journey that LifeChurch began a year ago. 2 years where we're just saying we're going to press into God and go to another place in our faith in Him, our love for Him, and our passion for His kingdom, that the fruit of this, the result of this, would be that every one of us, 100% of the people that call LifeChurch their church, that we'd go to a new place in this thing called generosity. And so it's been an amazing journey for this last year. I'm so excited to be at this halfway point. And it was never supposed to be a 5-week thing from a year ago. It was supposed to be a 2-year thing that would really change the rest of our lives, taking us to new places. And so I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. If last week you weren't here and didn't get one of these little books, I encourage you to grab one. They're out at the Elevate table, just straight out the door. This is different than the book that we had last year. We have new stuff that we're going over in our life groups, and really great things I've heard out of our life groups this week. I know I'm loving mine, and so you can grab one of these out at the Elevate area. If you've never gotten one of our Elevate t-shirts, those are available for free out at the table out there. Now, if you got one last year, don't get one this year. And so go and grab one of those. I'm just going to give this to you. And so if you have your Bibles, go over to 1 Samuel chapter 17. Today I'm going to, I want us to look at probably what is the most well-known story in King David's life, and one of the most well-known stories in the whole Bible. And it's this story where David kills Goliath. And it's a classic underdog story And what I love about this story is, and what I want to talk to you about today, is that I believe this was the moment where really everything changed for David. Sure, in a few weeks or a few months, we don't know how long before, Samuel had anointed him. We saw that yesterday. We don't know the time from when that happened until this moment. But what we do know is when that happened, not a lot changed for David. He was still working for his dad. He was still doing the shepherd thing. But when David killed Goliath, it was a turning point moment, what I'm calling a defining moment where everything changed after that. Can any of you remember maybe a moment in your life or a short season of time in your life, and you're like, at that moment, everything changed? I think about when I met Claire. I met Claire, and about a month and a half later, we started dating. And like 5 months later, we were engaged. And like 5 months later, we were married. And then like 3 months after that, she got pregnant with Lauren. And it was like everything, I look back, it's like, well, that life was like this, and then it was like this. Everything changed. And I look at moments in the life of our church, which have just been these pivotal moments where God did a fresh thing in our lives individually and collectively as a church. And so this story, I want to talk to you about today about how to make the most of defining moments, how to make sure you don't miss them. I really believe that this Elevate journey is really a defining moment in many of our lives personally and individually, and also a key defining moment in the life of our church. And so I want to show you today how to make the most of these. 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 3. So the background here is that the Israelites had these enemies, the Philistines. And so they gather up. There are these two mountain ranges that face one another, and there's this valley in the middle, right? And so the Israelite army's on the one side, the Philistine army is on the other side. There's this standoff. Both armies know that the first army that goes down to the valley is going to be sitting ducks for the other army that has the high ground. So there's been this long period of time where they've just been facing each other, taunting each other, but no real fighting has actually been happening. And so that's where we're catching up, verse 3. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel on the mountain on the other side, and a valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Now, as we look at ancient measurements, there's a couple of different ways these measurements can kind of be interpreted. Most scholars interpret this to mean that Goliath was well over 9 foot tall, right? Now, some scholars will look at those measurements and say, actually the measurements in this time at this place, it was probably more something over 7 foot tall. Now, at this point, the average Israelite man was probably as close to a good 10 inches smaller than the average man today. So the average man at that time was about 5 foot tall. So it really doesn't matter if Goliath is 7.5 feet tall or 9.5 feet tall. He's the largest human these people could ever imagine. That's the bottom line. And he was the champion of the Philistines. He was their baddest dude. And so here he is. It says he had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. The weight of that armor would be about 126 pounds. We've got this giant man who's armed from head to toe. He's got a spear that the head of that spear weighed about 15 pounds. He's heavily armed. He's this fierce warrior, right? And so we look here at verse 8. He stood and he shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." So here's what he's saying. He says, listen, if we all meet in this valley and fight, then thousands and thousands and thousands of people are going to die on both sides, right? He says, so how about you find your best warrior, have him fight me, and whoever wins we'll call the winner. Like if Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un got like in a cage match, right? And they said, hey, we're going to, and the winner's the winner, right? And huge pay-per-view income, right? And so that's the thing. He says, hey, we're going to get in the middle, and we're going to fight it out, whoever wins. And it's this powerful thing of what you could call the representative warrior. One of the powerful things about the Old Testament is that we see that these Old Testament heroes are types and shadows of Jesus, who's the ultimate hero. And so just as we see in this story, where David would fight the great enemy of Israel, Goliath, the one that wanted to enslave them and kill them. And David fights Goliath and wins. In this moment, he's this type and shadow of this representative warrior, the ultimate warrior, who's Jesus, who would do battle against the ultimate enemies, sin and death and hell and the devil. And so we see here that David is a kind of a foreshadowing and a picture of Jesus. But let me show you this. Let me show you how David maximized this defining moment. Here's the first thing. You got to see more than just the circumstances. What we see here, verse 10, it says, "And the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. And when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid." Here's the thing. Everybody else, from Saul down to the youngest warrior there, all everybody else could see was the circumstances. All everybody else could see is they've got this giant warrior, biggest man we've ever seen, maybe 9 foot tall, armed from head to toe, giant spear. He's been killing people as long as he can remember, and they are scared to death because all they could see were the circumstances. See, if in your life, if all you ever do is look at the natural circumstances of your life, it's going to cause you to miss out on these key defining moments that God has for you. Moments where he wants to do something fresh and new in your life. And so David was able to see in a way that not everyone was able to see. All they could see were the circumstances. There's a young woman named Florence Chadwick in 1952 attempted to swim from Catalina Island to the California coast in an attempt to set a record for covering that distance. She entered in the water. At that moment, it was clear, but soon after she got in the water, this heavy fog came down on the path before her. She was blinded by the fog. She couldn't see her way forward. She got disoriented and discouraged and gave up. She was tracked with a boat that was following her to ensure her safety. And when she got in that boat, the people in the boat, they were heartbroken to let her know. They said, "You were only about 300 yards away from the coast." But because of the circumstances that blinded her vision, she was unable to see. She got discouraged and disoriented. And one thing I love about this Elevate journey is I believe it's a moment where we take our eyes off just the natural circumstances in our lives. And we put them on God and we say, "God, what would you do fresh in my life that maybe if I were to look at the circumstances, I might not see that would even be possible? Well, how might you take my love for you, my faith in you, my generosity to this whole new level in spite of or even because of these circumstances which might look limiting, but in fact, they're not." And so David was able to see more than just the circumstances. Look here, verse 25. I love this next verse. It's one of the most honest, we see that David was a real dude, verse 25. He says, "And the men of Israel said, 'Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he's come up to defy Israel. And the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel.'" Here's what David did. David realized that the reward was worth the risk. So David shows up. He's there to take his brothers some cheese sandwiches. He shows up and he sees this guy Goliath who's taunting everybody. Nobody will go fight him. And then he kind of hears these guys talking, saying, "Oh yeah, Saul doesn't want to fight him, but he needs someone to fight him." And so there's this awesome reward. Whoever will go and kill the giant, Saul's going to give him tons of cash. Saul's going to give him his daughter, the pretty princess. And then that guy's family's going to never pay taxes again. And David's like, "Tons of cash? Pretty girl? Tell them I'm busy." And tons of cash and pretty girl, no taxes. And David starts thinking. He's like, "I like money. I like pretty girls. I hate paying taxes." Let's keep reading. And so then he keeps going. And David said to the man who stood by him, he says, repeat that. What did you just say? He says, "What did you just say? You get the pretty girl and tons of cash and no taxes?" He has him repeat it again. He says, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine to take away the reproach from Israel? For who is this?" So David recognizes that there's a great reward that made the risk worth it. See, all anybody else could see was the risk. All everybody else thought is it doesn't matter how big the reward is, I'm going to go out there and get killed. So it doesn't matter if I get the girl and the cash and my family doesn't pay taxes because I'm dead. But what David did is he focused less on the risk and more on the reward. Here's the thing. This whole idea of radical sacrificial generosity, it's threatening to us because it feels risky. It feels like, well, man, if I give God this, then what about this? And it feels like, oh my gosh, so risky. And here's the thing. We serve a God of rewards. The Bible talks about it a lot. And the Bible talks about rewards specifically in the context of generosity. Now, here's the thing. We don't give to get. There's a whole incorrect theology out there that just says, hey, if you give, then you're going to get a private jet and like a G6 and all this. And here's the thing. That's not the thing. But the thing about most false teachings, here's the truth. The thing about pretty much every false teaching that anyone buys into is there's a little kernel of truth to it. That then someone makes everything. They take this piece of the truth and then they make it the whole truth. And so there is this thing that God does reward radical generosity. We see it through through the Old Testament and the New Testament. The book of Malachi, God says, test me in this. Honor me with this first part of your income. See if I don't open up the floodgates of heaven. God says, I'm going to reward it. And we see in Luke 6, Jesus said, give, and it'll be given unto you, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. God said, he says, I'm going to reward this generosity. Go over to Matthew chapter 6. Let me show this to you. Matthew chapter 6. Look at verse 19. Jesus said, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Here's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, when you place your emphasis in life on the temporary, it will always leave you disappointed and unsatisfied. He says stuff doesn't last. My family and I have this little weird game sometimes we play where we'll go to an antique shop, right? And I'll say, hey guys, everybody has 90 seconds to find the oddest thing you can find in this shop. Oddest or most creepy thing you can find. And then we go around and then everyone brings back and there's always like the really old creepy looking doll someone finds, and anyway. And so whenever we go into an antique shop, in both a humorous way and to make myself think kind of way, I'll say to my kids, I say, hey guys, we're about to look at a bunch of dead people's stuff. Everything in here, someone dead bought. And then while I'm in there, I look around and I look at this stuff and I think at some point, someone thought this stuff was awesome enough to pay money for. And now it's in an antique shop being sold for $3. And that person's not here. They're gone. And I had to go get a part at a junkyard, part for my car at a junkyard. I couldn't find a new one anywhere, and so I go to this junkyard down in past Carson, and I'm looking at this junkyard, and I'm thinking, at some point, every one of these cars in this junkyard was shiny and new, and somebody was glad to buy it off that dealer's lot. And here now it is in a junkyard. And that's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying stuff won't last. It will wear out. It will get old. Someone will take it from you. And if you buy something that lasts your whole life, the time comes where you're going to leave this life and not be with it anymore. Jesus said, don't put your trust in the things of this world. He said, instead, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. How do we do that? I think there's a number of ways we can do it. Here's one way we certainly can do it. When we take money, which is a temporary thing, And then we invest it in what is eternal, which is the work of God in people, which is the extension of the kingdom of God. When I take money, which is temporary, and then I invest it in what is eternal, now that money is no longer a temporary thing. Now it's a forever thing. It is, Jesus said, being stored up for me in heaven. What does that mean? I'm not sure, but I am sure that it's awesome. In Philippians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul's talking to the church at Philippi. He's thanking them for their support of his ministry. And he says, hey, he says, I don't need your money. Here's the truth. God doesn't need your money. He says, I don't need your money. He says, but in fact, what I'm more concerned about is the effect it has on your life. He says, because when you give, what happens is it's stored up into an account for you, stored up to your credit. Paul says, hey, God is going to reward it. And then he goes on to talk about the reward of provision. And he says, and my God will meet all of your needs according to his riches and glory. There's this idea of reward. Do we give to get? Absolutely not. Am I saying that you're going to end up with a sweet mansion in Montreux? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that God is a God of rewards, both in this life and in the next. And many of his promises have to do with the rewards of this thing of generosity. And so this rewards thing. Here's the third thing. We understand who we are doing it for. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 17, and let me show you verse 26. We understand who we're doing it for. So David says, wow, so there's a pretty girl, there's lots of cash, no taxes. But there was more to it. So David said to the man who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? See, the circumcision was the mark of God's covenant with the Jewish people. So what David says is, he said, this guy who's taunting us, he's rejected our God, look here, that he should defy the armies of the living God. See, there was more to it for David than just the rewards. David recognized that there was more at stake. 3 different occasions, David says, this uncircumcised Philistine is defying the armies of the living God. David realized there was more at stake. It was the glory of God at stake. So we recognize in these defining moments, who am I doing this for? What else is at stake? And David said, there's more at stake than just me getting this prize. There's more at stake than just one nation having victory over another nation. There's more at stake than one nation becoming servants of another nation. He said, this is about the glory of God. We, the people of God, we shouldn't be living in fear against this guy who's rejected God and declared war on our God and on us. It was the glory of God at stake. And so in these moments where we find ourselves in these defining moments that can feel scary and they can feel risky, it's in those moments we say, who am I doing this for? What else is at stake? What's the bigger story? And here's the thing. This Elevate thing is not primarily about money, and it's not primarily about buildings. What it's primarily about is what is God doing in our hearts. It's primarily about God doing something fresh in us, and then God doing something fresh through us, where thousands and hundreds of thousands of people's lives are changed, where people come into relationship with God, where the kingdom goes forth, the glory of God goes forth. What else is at stake? Who am I doing it for? Here's the next thing. I'm going to make the most of my defining moments. I've got to discard discouragement. Let me show you this. Look at verse 28. Now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? So Eliab, the older brother, is taunting younger brother. Any of you guys have like a sibling that just loved to taunt you? Anyone have that sibling? Any of you guys were that sibling? Anyone? And so older brother's taunting younger brothers, like, what are you even doing here? And he makes it sound like David's job back home is worthless. Like David's just watching 3 sheep. Go back and watch your little sheep boy. You know? He's just taunting him. And he keeps it going. And I can't help but wonder if Eliab is looking back to that moment where Samuel came in and said, everyone would have thought it would have been the oldest son that would have been king. And where Samuel said, nope, God's rejected him. It's going to be sheep boy, you know? And maybe Eliab, ever since that moment, has just been thinking, man, should have been me. I don't know. Let's keep reading. He says, I know your presumption and the evil of your heart. So now he's attacking his heart. He's attacking his capability. He's saying, man, your job's nothing. He's attacking his heart, saying, you're just an arrogant punk. He says, I know the evil of your heart. If you've come down to see the battle, and David said, what have I done now? So we get this thing where this is always how it's gone. Older brother's always picking on younger brother, calling him nothing. He says, was it not but a word? He said, man, I just asked a question. Can nobody ask a question around here? He says he turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way before, the same way, and the people answered him again as before. Here's the quick picture we get. David's still saying, so if I kill the giant, I get the pretty girl, lots of money, and no taxes. It's like he's like, this is too good to be true. And he's like, does anybody have a picture of the girl, you know? And everyone's like, yes, David, that's how it goes. Lots of cash, pretty girl. It's like a music video, you know? And so, let's keep reading. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. So in this whole time, there's been nobody around that's had any interest in taking Saul's deal. And so Saul's in the court saying, man, does anybody, put out all the cash, put out the pretty daughter, said no taxes. Who said they're in? And they're like, nobody. And then they're like, hey, there is this guy, David. He says he's into it. He said, well, bring him to me. He said, at verse 32, David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. He said, I don't get why everyone's so scared of this giant. He says, your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you're not able to go against. So his brother discouraged him, and Saul discouraged him. In this defining moment, David is surrounded by discouragement. We see another passage about David's life where David says, David encouraged himself in the Lord. There's times in your life, specifically at key moments, where maybe everybody around is just going to tell you why it can't happen, why it won't work out, why you're not the one. Well, the fact that you would even think you might be the one makes you arrogant, like older brother said. Where Saul says, man, you're not strong enough, you're not big enough. He says, you're not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth, and he's been a man of war since he was just a kid. So we discard encouragement. What we see here, a few things about discouragement, is discouraged people discourage others. Goliath had discouraged Saul. He was scared to death. And then now all these people are scared. Discouragement is contagious. Fear and discouragement are contagious. Discouraged people discourage others. We see that the crowd is often wrong. And so when no one else would encourage David, David encouraged himself. And he says, man, God's in this. God's going to do something fresh. God's going to do something unusual. So we discard encouragement. Here's the next thing. We recognize God's preparation and provision. Look here, verse 33. So Saul says, hey, he's been fighting since he was a kid. You have no chance. And David said, verse 34, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed me. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and the uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them. Why? Because he's defied the armies of the living God. He says there's more at stake. The glory of God's at stake. He says, and David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to him, go, and the Lord be with you. So here's what David recognized, that while he had the job that nobody else wanted, while he had the job that his brothers made fun of him for having, go and keep your few little sheep out in the wilderness. He said, what God was actually doing was preparing me for this defining moment. He said, when a lion would come or a bear would come, he says, man, I killed those and I'm going to go kill that giant. He recognized God's preparation in his life. He recognized his preparation. He also recognized his provision. Skip down to verse 40. See, what happens next is Saul says, hey, if you're going to go, take my armor. Now, we know Saul was the biggest guy around. He was probably like 6'4", which would make him a giant in that time. And he says, and he was older. He was more filled out. And he said, hey, take my armor. And so David tries his armor. I was like, man, this is way too big. I've never worn armor before. No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go with what God has already put in my hand and put around me. Let me show you here, verse 40. It says, then he took his staff. So this was his staff. This This was the thing in his hand. God is more concerned with what he's put in your hand than what's not yet in your hand. We see it in the story of the boy's lunch, where it's like what the boy with his lunch, Jesus, it went from his hand and went into Jesus' hand, and it became far more than anyone could imagine. And so David has this staff in his hand. And he says he chose 5 smooth stones. So he took what he had and what was around him that God had provided from the brook, and he put them in his shepherd's pouch. Once again, the thing that he had. His sling was in his hand, the thing that he had. And he approached the Philistine. So what David did, instead of focusing on what he didn't have, which was years in the army, he said, you know what? God's used this experience to prepare me. Instead of focusing on what he didn't have, which was a spear and a sword and all the stuff that warriors in that day would have had, he said, what I do have is I've got this stick, I've got this staff, and I've got this pouch, and I've got this sling, and I've got these rocks that God's put right here. And he recognized God's provision. Many, many, many times we have got far more resources in our hands and around us than we realize. And so in these defining moments, I recognize God's provision and his preparation. I wonder for you, how might God have prepared you and provided for you in this Elevate journey? Here's the next thing. We trust God to bring the victory. 1 Samuel 17, verse 37. It says, David said, the Lord, he delivered me from the paw of the bear, and it will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And then he says the same thing. We skip down to verse 45, and he's talking to Goliath, and David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. David wanted Goliath and everybody else to know the stakes were higher. This was about the glory of God. He says, you've got all that army stuff, but what I've got is I'm coming in the name of the Lord of hosts. I'm coming in the name of God. He's trusting in him. And he said, verse 46, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. Here's the thing. David trusted God. David believed that God was about to do something big in and through him. I heard Rick Warren say it like this. He says, God tends to do as much in our lives as we expect him to. There's exceptions to the rule, but usually whatever God's doing in your life is exactly what you expect him to. If you expect him not to do much, he's probably not doing much. If you expect him to do a lot, he's probably doing a lot. Jesus, when he was healing somebody, he said, I've done it according to your faith, be it done to you. There's this thing where God responds to our trust in him. And so everybody in that army, they weren't expecting much of God. All they could see was the circumstances, the big giant with all the armor, and that's all they could see. But David had this expectation that God was going to come through big, that God was going to do something big. One thing I love about Elevate is it's a chance for us to demonstrate our trust, for us to choose trust. Here's the final thing. If I'm going to make the most of my defining moments, I've got to kill the giants that would enslave us. See, the thing is, this battle, it wasn't just about 2 guys, and it wasn't even just about the prize, and it wasn't even only about this thing of God's glory, but the losers were going to become the slaves of the winners. And so that's why when these folks were discouraging David, it wasn't just that they were scared David was going to die. They knew that their life was tied into how David did killing this giant. And if he lost, they became the servants of the Philistines. And I believe in the defining moments of our lives, we take opportunities to kill the giants in our lives that would enslave us. We kill the giants. And so we see here David goes and he takes that sling and he takes that rock and it hits Goliath in the forehead, and Goliath falls right down, and David goes over and chops his head off just to ensure the deal was done. David killed the giant. And here's the thing. I believe this Elevate moment is a moment that if we'll take advantage of it, is a chance for God to kill some of the giants in our life that have been enslaving us. Or that if we allow them to continue to grow, will begin to enslave us. Here's the thing. I said it last year, I'll say it this year. If after this service, one of you came out to me in the foyer, gave me a check for $9.5 million, I would say thank you. I would take the check. I would give you an uncomfortably long hug. We would let it linger. Scott Rhoda or somebody else would be at our bank first thing tomorrow morning. We would deposit it. We would wait for the check to clear. And we would still do Elevate. Because I believe that these moments are moments where God can do heart surgery in our lives. See, when Jesus said, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is also. What he's saying is there's this direct link between our money and our hearts. And he's saying when your money goes this way, your heart goes this way. And when your heart goes this way, your money goes this way. They're linked. And that's why Jesus talks so much about money. It's not because God needs your money. It's because there's this direct link between our money and our hearts. And the thing is, radical generosity has the power to kill and some of the biggest giants in our life. If you struggle with the giant of selfishness, the two greatest cures for selfishness in your life are service and generosity. That's the way to kill the giant of selfishness in your life, is giving and serving. If you struggle with the giant of greed or materialism, giving is the antidote to these things in our life. When I give, I'm taking blows and killing that giant in my life. It's this giant of greed and materialism. Giving's the killer of that giant. The giant of fear. The reason people don't give, some of them, is because they're just scared, because it does feel risky. And this giant of fear or scarcity, where there's this instinct that just says, I'm just going to hoard and hold on to. It's because of fear. But when I give, I'm killing that giant. I'm saying I'm choosing faith over fear. I'm going to trust that God is my provider and that He is a rewarder of generosity in this life and in the next. This giant of living for the temporary. When I give, I'm taking money which is temporary and I'm investing it in that which is eternal, and I'm killing that giant in my life. This giant of caring more about my kingdom than His. When I give and invest in His kingdom, I'm choosing to kill that giant in my life. I believe this moment is a moment for some of us as we give to do battle with these giants that would seek to enslave us, just like those Philistines were looking to enslave those Israelites. I believe this moment, this Elevate season, this 2-year moment that we're praying that God would use to change us forever, I believe it's a defining moment for us individually where God wants to do fresh things in our life, to take us to new places with Him. I encourage you to fully engage it. If you're not yet in a life group, though, someone at that table out there can help you find one. I encourage you to wrestle with God. Ask Him to do heart surgery in your life. I believe it's a defining moment for us as a church and for us individually. Let me pray for you. So, Father, that is our prayer. God, that this moment we're in, this 2-year journey, that would it be something, God, that You really do some fresh things in our lives, that it would be a defining moment, that we wouldn't be the same again. God, that we wouldn't have our eyes so much on circumstances that we miss what You want to do. God, that we wouldn't focus more on the risks, but God, that we'd focus more on the rewards. God, help us just to have big faith, believing for You to do big things in our lives, big things in our hearts, big things through us, God, both individually and corporately. For Your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.